Hi there. Welcome to Conversations with Sue and Tim.
And as you can see tonight, we're doing what a lot of people are doing these days. We are here all masked up. Of course, we're in our house, so we're not going to wear these, but we wanted to start tonight because there's a special story behind these masks.
These masks are great. They are music note masks made lovingly by my cousin, Kathy Karpinski. So thank you so much, Kathy. I was mentioning that I was having trouble finding masks. Looked online. I finally ordered some on Etsy, but they won't be here till almost June. And then she saw my post and the conversation going on my Facebook page, and she dropped these off. So how wonderful and thoughtful. And they're cotton, and they're really well made and washable and music notes.
Yeah.
So we had to wear them for our often music-themed podcast.
So thank you for these. We will wear them in good health. And it looks like, it's kind of another thing we've talked about, it looks like that masks and wearing masks in large public places may become kind of the norm for us and for other people.
There's some in Ohio. First, it was requested and suggested we wear masks after the whole.
Yeah, there's kind of a back and forth.
Yeah, don't wear them right at the beginning. And then we heard Governor DeWine was going to make every mask wearing mandatory to go into grocery stores and other places in public. And then that was stepped back a little bit. So I don't. It's confusing. I don't know exactly what the official rule is, but certainly the recommendation is to wear masks.
To protect yourself, to protect others. And now we know, as of yesterday or the day before, that now the stay-at-home order has been extended pretty much through May now. But we'll still be able to go to grocery stores. I think some businesses will slowly open. There's going to be guidelines.
Yeah, and he's got a slow open process starting now. But
I think a lot of people are realizing what's good for you. And I think whether we're told you don't have to wear masks or not, I think people will probably just say, I'm going to be safe.
Well,
if I need to go somewhere, I'll put a mask on.
I don't know. I mean, obviously, in today's news, there was all these people protesting, and you're taking away my rights, and it's an infringement on my freedoms. And without getting political, I don't think it's political. I think it's just common sense. But there are a lot of people in disagreement of that. But I kind of feel like certain things, maybe it is a little bit of an infringement. But I go back to September 11th, and everything changed after that. And we had a lot of infringements, inconveniences. Flying is completely different now. And
a lot changed in the travel industry after September 11th.
Yeah, and I just never felt like, okay, if it takes a few extra minutes, but it's for safety, I'll do it. And that's the way I feel about this. It's not like this is just a United States thing. It's a worldwide pandemic.
Yeah, indeed. So we'll continue to wear a mask and be as safe as we can. We hope you do too.
Yeah.
Something else we always talk about a little bit, we kind of begin with these conversations by tipping a glass of wine to your health.
To yours.
And to yours.
What's tonight's wine, Tim?
This is called Mancus. It is a red wine, obviously, a cab, and we get it at Regency Wine Room, Wine Cellars. What is it? Regency Wine Cellars.
Regency Wine Cellars, retail bar and a lovely wine bar that our friend Susan Mazingo owns. And
nice small plates there. We've talked about that.
Susan has a number of delicious wines, and she switches them up that are her house pours. But this was one of her house pours that we discovered, and just a great California cab. But what we like about it is that it's very reasonably priced at about $12.
Yeah.
So
go in, you'll find it in and she is open for business during certain hours. So if you want to go in and get a couple of bottles of wine, she'll be probably most days between like noon and 4. Maybe find them on Facebook. But that is a good bottle of wine. You'll find it in a big bin for about $12.99.
That's wonderful.
That's the way to take it home. We also are noticing that Sue is wearing the trademark Lips and Tongue Rolling Stones logo shirt tonight, the glittery version.
Yeah, every time I put this shirt on, I think about Sherry Roth, my friend, who I met when I was working at a radio station, and she's a record rep, and now she works for Warner Brothers, but she's a huge Rolling Stones fan. And a couple years ago, she was in town when the Rolling Stones exhibit was going on at the Rock Hall of Fame. So we went and it was cool. And we have pictures of us, and I was wearing
Yeah.
this shirt. And you
So
have
the
your
event got the
turntable
t-shirt.
shirt on.
You can't really see
yeah.
it. It's a dark shirt, but there's like kind of a gray
Vinyl.
like an old-fashioned record player, kind of with the lid that closed, probably in the bad needle that damaged your records. But it's kind of a throwback shirt too.
Tim always has really cool T-shirts.
Because you buy them for me.
They're always rock and roll because he is Tim Doherty, the rock and roll authority.
Which brings us to our
Yes.
point about why we're going to talk to you about the Rolling Stones, is because a week or so ago I read an article of an interview with Sir Paul McCartney, who somebody threw the question out. They said, in the final analysis now at this stage of your career and your life, who do you think was the better band?
What a
The Beatles?
setup.
Yeah, the Beatles or the Rolling Stones?
Like, what's he going to say?
Yeah.
First of all, he has to say the Beatles because he's the Beatles.
He is the Beatles.
And secondly, they're going to take that and like take the quote and
Yeah.
make it all controversial.
But he had some reasons. He said
What did he say though?
we sort of said that we wanted to be a very experimental band in the studio. They're touring not so much because they really were more focused on what sounds and records and themes they could create in the studio.
But he
So-
did say the headline was he said they were the better band.
Oh yeah, he did. That's true. He did say, "I think we were the better band." So yeah, I buried the lead. So of course that quote got served up to Mick Jagger, who took it in good humor. He sat back and he smiled because he's known Paul. They're both in their 70s now. They've known each other a long time. And he sat back and he said, "Oh, Paul, he's such a sweetheart," and he meant that.
Yeah.
He said, and I can understand what he means by the fact that they were very innovative in the studio. They didn't do a lot of touring. What's the Rolling Stones have toured for how many years?
And they're still
50,
56. Yeah, and they
And
were
we
going to
would-
tour this summer.
We would be
except
seeing the Rolling
pandemic.
Stones in Cleveland in a little over a month from now.
Mm-hmm.
But obviously, that's a lot of those things have been put off on hold. It would have been the first time for the Stones in Cleveland in 18 years, and I was at that show. It was my one and only time seeing the Stones. So,
I have never seen this.
see, we should have gone, or we
Yeah.
could have gone, but
Well,
maybe
no,
someday.
we can't. Yeah.
So anyway, Mick said the fact that the Rolling Stones were more of they churned out the albums, but they were a touring band. They were a straight ahead rock and roll band. And he said the fact of the matter is he feels lucky to still be in a band that still tours 50 plus years on, still fills stadiums as they do. And he says, and by the way, that other band simply doesn't exist anymore. But he
Yeah.
said that in good humor.
Now, of course, that other band doesn't exist for many reasons. They were broken up, and they always said they wouldn't get back together. Two of them are gone now.
Yeah.
But it's still always the question: if they were alive, if all four of them were together and still living, and John and George were still around, would they get back together? And you think they would
Easily. Everything we saw in the 80s, like, the USA for Africa and the fundraising, when people really realized that rock and roll could be used to raise a lot of money for good causes, I think that probably would have brought the Beatles out of, for a brief
Well,
show or
maybe
two.
they just would have done an appearance on a
Yeah.
stage, but would they have? I don't know. I don't think they will ever tour again because they always said, and as we're talking about the Beatles, it seems like we talk about the Beatles all the time. I always feel like we shouldn't even talk about them without David Friedman, who's a dear friend of ours in the record business, who works for Universal Music Group. But when I met him, he worked for Columbia, so he's worked for different places. But one thing that I immediately knew and loved about him is that he is a Beatles fan. And he's a book. I mean,
He knows a lot.
he's an encyclopedia on the Beatles, so we should have him on the show one of these days. But
We'll have to Zoom with him because he's down in Nashville.
yes, but the thought about them getting back together is we've talked about this before. They were so innovative in the studio that they couldn't do those kind of things, on a stage.
Hard to recreate on a stage when you had thousands of people screaming. The
But
noise was deafening.
we started talking about this, and then I saw this article. How the computer or phones or devices read your mind and whatever you're talking about. This article pops up, and it was from a magazine called PaceMagazine.com, and it talked about this very thing. It was about which was the better band, and so I just thought that it was kind of fun to go back and forth on, but. The Rock and Roll Hall of Fame uses a criteria that honorees must have demonstrated unquestionable musical excellence and talent and had a significant impact on the development, evolution, and preservation of rock and roll. So
That's like their mission statement.
yeah, that's kind of like how they decide, who should go in or not. So when you're talking about, this magazine kind of outlined 4 things that they thought were important to achieve, the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame's mission. Innovation, inspiration, durability, and diversity. And so, I was just thinking about innovation. I mean, was anybody more innovative in the studio than the Beatles. I mean,
They were very interested in making sounds. I think Sir George Martin really helped them develop to do that, and they really enjoyed that part of their career, which was how many years?
8 years
as a band.
Well, 8 years as a band, but only like 4 touring, and then they went into the studio. But they were like the first studio band to print lyrics on their album. I didn't know that.
Now, what would that have been? You think that was Sgt. Pepper? Because the lyrics are on Sgt. Pepper.
And they were pioneers of the concept album.
Yeah.
And they were the first to create A singles on both sides, which we talked about that.
Right.
So that's kind of interesting. And the Stones had they had some of their own.
It's funny you should say that because you're wearing the Stones shirt, but now I've got to take. I'm not saying I'm taking the Stones side, but on the side of the Rolling Stones, they were the first to do home recording and mobile recording. They had the rig, the Rolling Stones truck thing. They had the logo that didn't include their name. That was the logo.
Yeah, they had their logo, and they even had an album or two that didn't have their name on them because you saw this and that said the Rolling Stones.
Yeah.
And the Beatles, their logo was the Beatles. This was the Rolling Stones.
Yeah. You got to wonder if they had the album that didn't have their name on it, just the logo. Mm-hmm. Did the Beatles counter with that with just the White Album? Because the White Album is just the White Album.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until later that record company people probably thought, you got to put the name somewhere. Mm-hmm. And I don't think it was originally printed. Wasn't it embossed?
Yeah, down on the bottom somewhere.
So it said
That's
the Beatles.
a David question.
Meanwhile, the Rolling Stones, some of their albums, they were the first to incorporate modern design into their record sleeves.
Well, they had the zipper sticky fingers.
Sticky fingers.
And what was, they had another.
There's a funny story about sticky fingers. I think Andy Warhol might have had something to do with that. But the first pressings, I won't say hundreds of thousands, but thousands of pressings of that included the working zipper on the sticky fingers. And they found out later that when they stacked albums in a box, like 32 a box, they were damaging the vinyl inside. Because the weight of the album sitting down.
So then they had to take it out.
They had to kind of just.
But those ones with the zipper are worth a lot. If you find vinyl with the zipper.
Yeah.
And they also had like a 3D. One of their albums was a 3D, and that was somewhat innovative. So they did a lot of that artsy stuff before anybody else did. So on the other thing, like inspiration, the Rock Hall is like this guy from Pace Magazine said. You have to look at the greatness of a band, any band, by who they inspired. Like what doors they opened for other people. How many bands said, I was inspired by the Beatles and I was inspired by the Stones. And there were quite a few, I think.
It's funny because how many people and rockers of this day who are now actually like the elder statespeople of rock who said, when I saw the Beatles on Ed Sullivan in 1963, I knew that's what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
So many said that we grew up listening to.
And there were bands like, 10cc and Harry Nilsson and...
Yellow, Badfinger, Bee Gees, Cheap Trick, Bowie.
Beach Boys, too.
Beach Boys.
They heard Sgt. Pepper's and wanted to do Pet Sounds.
Yeah, actually Pet Sounds came before Sgt. Pepper's.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry.
So there was a bit of a rivalry between the Beatles and the Beach Boys about that. Because I remember...
Oh, yeah, they heard that, and then that inspired them, and they wanted to go in and do something really even crazier and more creative. And...
Paul McCartney once said, the moment they put the needle on Pet Sounds when it came out, he said, oh, dear me, what are we going to do to top this? I won't say they topped it, but they came up with a good one.
But
so,
then the
Beatles
Stones,
inspired so many.
The Stones certainly inspired, too, but they were more of a, really just a rock band, and the bands they inspired were heavier rock.
Bands like AC/DC, Aerosmith, which, by the way, Keith and Mick were the Glimmer Twins. Steven Tyler and Joe Perry were the Toxic Twins, if you remember that little story.
Well, but you gotta say similar things about Aerosmith. I mean, they are like the Stones. They are still together.
They were our Stones, yeah.
Yeah, they're not 50 years, but they're 30 plus.
No, they're up there
40,
now.
all right.
Probably over 40.
Yeah.
And Steven Tyler kind of looked like Mick. He was like our Mick. And same kind of facial
features. Yeah, that's true.
But the Stones also, bands like Faces, the Flamin' Groovies. Who remembers the Flamin' Groovies? New York Dolls.
We're inspired by the Stones,
The Black Crowes, ZZ Top. Also, Bowie's name is on there. So Bowie was kind of like, I think he was just sort of a chameleon. He could just take it all in and transform it into whatever.
Yeah, and then you get to like the durability of the music, the diversity of the music to really. And I think that both bands obviously are extremely durable. As the touring band and the band that still exists, there's the Stones. But as a band that has a depth and breadth of music that will be played until the end of time, that even after only eight years as a band, they're still selling. It's still being played on the radio.
They had the two best-selling vinyl albums 3 years ago.
In 2017.
In 2017, when Sgt. Pepper, Abbey Road came out, those were the biggest selling albums.
Vinyl. Yeah.
Vinyl.
Yeah, so, and the Stones, I don't think, have sold quite the massive number of albums that the Beatles have. So, I don't know. I mean, who's the greater band?
I don't know.
I think the Beatles.
Let's mention a quote or two from bands, certainly, and people in these bands that we know. Like Jimmy Page of Led Zeppelin said, if it hadn't been for the Beatles, there wouldn't be anyone like Led Zeppelin. Now listen to this quote. The Beatles were the first to actually find that middle path between artistic and intellectual, and at the same time still be on the street. You know who said that? Keith Richards.
Keith Richards could speak
of the
like
Rolling
that?
Stones. He could speak like that. Perhaps he wrote it down first. I don't know.
So if you had to, forget the Beatles and the Stones for a while, what enduring rock band, in your mind? I mean, I am not an outrageous fan of Aerosmith, but I do have a real appreciation for Aerosmith,
Well,
and I mean, they do just rock. They still do, and Steven Tyler can scream, and he still can. I mean, he's still got a great voice for his age.
Yeah. Not to drop names, but there was one time when I got to take you backstage to meet Joe Perry and Steven Tyler. And
Joe Perry was rolling his eyes and very
It's just one of those things,
standoffish.
kind of an assembly line of people going by having pictures taken. But once Steven Tyler saw her,
Oh, Steven Tyler does that with every woman back there, but he was very gracious.
me and Joe Perry in the picture were like this. So, but he loved her. But also they were a band that really transformed, and they went through some hard times. They came out hard rocking, influenced by the Beatles and the Stones, and then obviously drugs took over their lives and almost killed them. And then they were just gone for a while. And it was Run DMC that sort of relit the fuse underneath Aerosmith when they did their version of Walk This Way.
Yes,
and the video
and
included
brought him back.
Aerosmith, yeah. And then they became something different in the 80s and 90s, and then they're still out doing it.
Diane Warren wrote "Don't Want to Miss a Thing" and a bunch of other ridiculous hits, but that really put him on the map with the movie
Armageddon.
Yeah.
Was it Armageddon?
I think it was Armageddon.
Yeah.
There was
Bruce Willis and a Comet. And
there was a couple of movies out there that were similar in
Ben
theme.
Affleck. You know whose daughter was in that? Steven Tyler's daughter was in that movie. Liv Tyler, yeah.
But that song was amazing, and the way he can scream at the end of that one is just...
That may still be their biggest hit, don't you think?
It could have been, as far as... Because it was a crossover. It got played everywhere, not just on the rock stations. And speaking of other enduring voices who can scream, every time I watch David Grohl, I get a sore throat. The Foo Fighters are amazing, and I love him because he's over 50. And my God, you had a quote from him. You said his mom.
Oh, his mom used to say, David, I love your music, but you got to be hurting yourself when you're stop screaming. Take a lozenge, drink some milk or something.
Take a lozenge.
Yeah.
Some of the other really great rock and roll voices, I think that I think are a little bit underrated is I think Bob Seger. And I don't mean to disclaim it when I say I was never really a huge Bob Seger fan. I mean, I'm a Bob Seger fan, but it's like I didn't have a ton of his albums or anything like that. But every time I hear him really sing, he's just got a really great rock voice. Yeah.
Another one was Ronnie James Dio, now deceased. He's been gone for a while, but he had an amazing, almost operatic voice. Steve Perry of Journey had a very classically trained voice as well.
Steve Perry was classically trained. I remember the Journey concert way back when, and we got to go backstage, and he was in the other room training, and he was doing his warm-ups.
Yep.
And they were these opera scales, and we were like, who's that? And I didn't know that Steve Perry was classically trained until then. And he's in there going, ooh, all the
warm-ups that you got to do.
And it's incredible.
Yeah.
Are there any other voices that you can think of
come
that
to my
would
mind right now? But yeah, I'm sure there's. What are some of yours? Let us know who some of your favorite singers are and why.
Yeah, I mean, we could go through the female voices, and we should do that next because one of the things I really like to talk about is the women in rock music that just there just weren't as many
Yeah.
real rockers like the Stones on that level. You had the Joan Jetts and the Hearts, but there are some really great rock vocalists and guitar players that just are underrated, and you don't hear about them because rock history has been so male dominated.
Pat Benatar was another one with a classically trained voice.
Oh yes, yeah.
And she's still out there doing it. Missed Rock Hall induction by about that much. She was like second on the list of the fan favorites, but didn't get through this
It
time.
is mind-boggling, the people who are in when people like that aren't. We have this discussion every year at the Rock
And
Hall.
I would have thought that she would have, with her husband being from Northeast Ohio, Neil Giraldo, I would have thought that little bit of hometown boy made good would have helped them, but it didn't seem to help them this time.
So, as we kind of come to a close in the rock discussion, we're just kind of getting to the pandemic, and I hope you're doing okay. How are you doing? What's driving you the most crazy being at home, other than
The weather.
living with me?
It's the wine that helps. No,
Yeah.
the weather, I wish, as we've said before, I just wish, like this weekend's looking nice.
Tomorrow's supposed to be nice.
I just wish we could get to a consistent 60, 70 degree days, some sunshine, get with the cold, get rid of the cold.
It's been
Makes it
really
easier.
hard. Yeah, the weather has been tough, and I'm really anxious to get out there too. But I'm going to do it safely.
What's keeping you sane?
Oh, I don't know. I've had some experiences the last 2 weeks where I've been doing Zoom classes with our grandson Oliver. My daughter lives in Portland, Oregon with the two kids, our grandkids, and it's really tough because I would have probably been there by now a couple of times.
Helping out.
And I had to cancel a trip when all this happened. So now that there's no school, I had she's just really struggling. Her and Todd, the kids' parents, are both working full time, of course, and both now working from home.
And I bet a lot of you can identify with that.
And the
I hear
kids,
ya.
they're not teachers. And we were just talking to one of our coworkers the other day, and he was saying this is so hard. He has, they have kids about the same age as our grandkids, and he's like, we're not teachers. We aren't trained to do this. We're doing our best, but we're trying to teach them their classes while we're doing our work from home.
Which is also the new norm, and the learning curve of trying to do your job in your home.
Yeah.
With other distractions, the kids,
With the
just
kids.
housework and everything.
And I think, he mentioned this, and this is true. There's so many people on social media that are like, I'm doing this, and I'm learning a new language, and I'm teaching my kids, and here's all the cute things. And we have to remember, we only show our best on social media. More people are having, they don't have the perfect situation, and their kids aren't perfectly behaved, and, they're struggling too. So if you're struggling with the working from home and trying to teach the kids, you're not alone. And
We'll raise a glass to you.
yeah, this week was it's good. It's keeping me sane to be able to talk to the kids,
Help them out, yeah.
but it's also lonely. This has been a little isolating.
Yeah,
And
indeed.
I miss our kids. Your kids, we can't. They live locally.
Yeah, they live closer.
We
We
can't
see
see
them. Yeah.
So I don't want to do one of those. We're all in this together, but I know we're all suffering
Yeah,
in
you kinda-
different ways.
Are you getting bored with those trite phrases too? We're all in this together, and the piano music and all the sad
Yeah,
commercials,
yes.
some of which we've had to voice.
Yes, in
Yeah.
these uncertain times.
unprecedented, troubling times.
And that's why we started our little conversation. So
We hope you like it.
yeah, we appreciate that you've stayed with us, if you did stay with us, and we hope you stay safe and healthy,
Cheers.
and we'll talk to you soon.
Before we leave, we have to mask up. Keep those masks handy. Thank you, Kathy.
You're the best cousins ever.